Hello and welcome to this presentation on Gems in the Dunes, a project in the Sefton Coast. I'm Alistair McMurdo, one of the volunteers in the project. Gems in the Dunes is part of the wider Back from the Brink programme. This is a programme funded by the National Lottery with the intention of trying to protect and encourage endangered species throughout the country. It's managed by several organisations. The lead one is Natural England. Several relevant wildlife and environmental organisations are involved. Gems in the Dunes is managed by ARC, the Amphibian and Reptile Conservation Trust. The relevance there is that two of the main species that we're trying to help are the Natterjack toad and the sand lizard. So ARC is clearly the relevant partner there. The project started in mid-2017, though it really got going on the ground at the end of 2017 when work started, and I was privileged to be one of the first to get my hands dirty. The project was due to end in August 2020, but luckily some extra funding came along and the project was extended to December 2020. However, this year, like everybody else, COVID has taken its toll. Not much work has been done on the project because of it, and we're hoping that there may be an extension into 2021. In the Dunes just has two full-time paid officers, Fiona, the project manager, and Andrew, the project officer. They do quite a lot. They don't just lead the volunteers, they have to plan work, agree the work, schedule it, they talk to schools, they promote the project. They have to discuss the project and its impact on the other organisations and landowners on the Sefton Coast. So they're a pretty busy pair of people. They also get their hands dirty doing some of the volunteering work like the rest of us. And of course, the rest of the team is made up of the volunteers. The project has to work in partnership with several other organisations. Green Sefton is the department of the Sefton Council, which looks after the environment, grounds and so on. They manage a local national reserve between Birkdale and just south of Ainsdale. Natural England, they manage a national nature reserve which starts just south of Ainsdale and goes down to Formby, and another smaller one just south of Formby. National Trust, of course, well known for their management of the pine woods at Formby and famous for the red squirrels therein. There are a number of landowners, private landowners, that the partnership has to work with. Most of these, being the Sefton Coast, are golf courses, and in fact the golf courses are quite constructive and participative in the project. The species which Gems in the Dunes was set up to protect are six, 3 animals and 3 plants. The animals are the Natterjack toad, the sand lizard and the northern green tiger beetle, and the plants are the petalwort, sea bryum and matted brown. Of course, the project doesn't just benefit these 6, it benefits all the natural animals, birds, plants, fungi that are growing in the dunes. 5 of those 6 species. Centre stage there is the Natterjack toad with that distinctive yellow stripe down its back. I should say that this one is very young, probably recently emerged from a pool, and it's sitting on my palm. Top left is the sand lizard. This is a male in his breeding colours, those lovely green flanks and the brown speckled back. Top right is the northern dune tiger beetle, apparently one of the fastest running insects in the world. It has huge jaws relative to the size of its body, a really feisty predator. Bottom left is petalwort. Now this picture has been blown up. Petalwort is actually only about 1 to 2 millimeters across. It grows in damp sand, usually amongst other vegetation, so very difficult to see. Bottom right is sea bryum. Now unfortunately, sea bryum, along with its near relative matted bryum, have not been seen on the Sefton Coast since the inception of the project, and are now deemed to be extinct on the Sefton Coast, which is a great shame. The problems that gave rise to gems in the dunes are common problems everywhere. There's development, erosion, and invasive species. Those are the main three. This is a map of Sefton's natural coast. Now, 200 years ago or so, most of the coloured area would have been covered in sand dunes. However, today, the sand dune system is restricted to a fairly narrow strip along the coastline. Of course, a great deal of this is due to development, as anywhere. Once upon a time, there were only a few small communities at Birkdale, Ainsdale, Formby, Crosby. Now, most of the area has been developed. Southport has grown and has incorporated Birkdale and Ainsdale. Formby has grown, Crosby has grown, Hightown has come along. Also, the pine woods have been planted a century or more ago. Very beloved by a lot of people and very important for many species. But they do restrict the sand dune system where the species that Gems in the Dunes is trying to look after exist. The red line shows the line of the coast about 50 years ago. And you can see two things there, that at Formby Point, the coast had eroded a long way, but at Crosby and north at Birkdale or so, the coast is actually accreting. The material is being eroded from Formby, is being deposited south around Crosby and north around Birkdale. The problem with the erosion at Formby is that the coast is now extremely close to the pine woods, and in the next 10 or 20 years, only takes a few bad storms to actually get the coast to meet the pine dunes, thus cutting out the corridor of sand dunes between the north and the south, which of course, as you know, is a bad thing for creatures like lizards and toads and beetles and so on. Not to mention the birds that many people watching this video will be interested in. The main invasive species are sea buckthorn, Japanese rose, and everlasting pea. Here are those three culprits. On the left, sea buckthorn showing a fairly mature plant and the typical berries. The berries, by the way, seem to last quite a long time. I have seen them as late as February. People make things from the berries. I've tasted buckthorn jam and it's disgusting. It was planted by who else? The Victorians, for two reasons. One, they were obsessed with stabilizing the sand, which is a shame because we know now that mobile sand is very good for the ecosystem. The other reason, it's a very good boundary plant. Anybody who's been into buckthorn and emerged with torn clothes and cut skin will know exactly why that's the case. It's a fast grower, buckthorn, and it spreads fast. It spreads via its roots, which push up new plants. It can't really be dug out with anything but by hand. It's difficult to get machinery into it. It's very expensive to do that, of course, given how widespread it is. So it's a job for the volunteers. Japanese rose in the center there, the ubiquitous Japanese rose, you'll all know it, taking hold in the various places in the dunes, can only be removed by machinery. It has to be dug out very deep, well below the roots, in order for it not to regrow. Everlasting pea on the right there, the photo is taken in a garden. It is a garden escapee, very recent one. I would say about 5 years ago. I don't recall seeing any everlasting pea in the dunes, but now there's quite a lot, and it does push out the native flora. So I think although nothing's being done about it at the moment, I think in the next couple of years, somebody is going to have to take responsibility of getting rid of it. So, what do volunteers do? Main categories. One is the monitoring and surveying of the species, the 5 species, and habitat management to encourage those species. Monitoring and surveying takes place on natterjacks, sand lizards, northern tiger beetle, and pecklewort. Here are those 4 species. For the natterjack, monitoring and surveying starts in about or March when the breeding program starts, and ends in August when the last of the toadlets are leaving the pools. This probably takes the most volunteer activity in spring and summer, because there are about 200 pools on the Sefton coast, which are divided up amongst the volunteers. Myself and my friend Esne are responsible for about 12 of those pools, and we monitor and survey the natterjacks in those pools. That's a continuous program. At least once a week we go down there. Starts off by counting the spawn strings as a result of the breeding. Carries on through the various stages of the tadpoles, when they're little and just emerging, when they've got 2 legs, when they've got 4 legs, when the tails have gone, and when they become toadlets and start leaving the pools. We also do occasional monitoring at night of the adult population. Not easy to see them, very easy to find them in the breeding season. They are known as the Birkdale nightingales because of the extremely loud noise that they make. Sand lizard. A sand lizard is very territorial, so in some ways easier to count them, but of course it's very well camouflaged, so it's quite difficult to see. Our fellow volunteer Paul Lynch, known as Mr. Lizard, I think knows every sand lizard on the coast. He knows when they were born, he knows what offspring they've had, he knows where the offspring have gone to. Nothing he doesn't know at all. Northern tiger beetle, they're quite flexible, they run around everywhere. It's generally monitored by parties going out and surveying a fixed area, counting the number of the beetles and comparing that to previous readings. Is something I avoid, I must say, because this is how it's surveyed. You have to get on your hands and knees, creep through damp sand, trying to find this tiny little plant and counting them. I take my hat off to my fellow volunteers who do this job. The surveying results are recorded on a piece of software called Living Record and uploaded to ARC. ARC take the records for the whole country in terms of the projects which they are responsible for, and they do the analysis and reporting on results. The habitat management is mainly in 3 categories: creation and maintenance of the pools, creation of sand patches, and the so-called buckthorn bashing. Of course, this activity doesn't just benefit the species that Jens and the Dunes is targeting, it benefits nearly all the ecosystem. Here's an example of pools and sand patches. On the left is a pool that we created last year. This area would have been full of buckthorn, creeping willow and other plants. We dig all that out, we dig down into the sand to reach the water table. We clear not just water but the surrounding sand. That gives the natterjacks easy access, and the result is what you see there. Of course, the pools get scrubbed up, that buckthorn and creeping willow and whatnot always comes back, so we occasionally do maintenance in the pools to keep the scrub down. On the right is a sand patch that we created recently, always sloping, usually facing southeast, in order that the sand lizards have somewhere to bask in the mornings and warm up their bodies. No more than 4 square meters a sand patch, and always surrounded by vegetation for the sand lizard to scoot back into. Here's examples of the famous buckthorn bashing. On the left, the before photo of a group of us tackling a large area of sea buckthorn. And at the right, the result, very satisfying to look back when you've done the work on an area that's been cleared. And you'll notice from that photo that buckthorn has to be burned. If you leave a pile of buckthorn just lying on the dunes, they will root and start to regrow. Probably for me, the most important aspect of those two photos is the one on the left, the bags in the foreground containing the flasks of tea and the biscuits. Great motivators. To give you a rest from my voice and to bring Gems in the Dunes alive, what follows now is a very short video created by the Back from the Brink team.
It's spring in the north of England, and natterjack toads have gathered in pools of fresh water for a night of courtship. The males are locked in a singing contest. The prize, the favour of a female. She will spawn here, leaving her tadpoles to fend for themselves. These toads live in a surprising location: the beach.
The beautiful Sefton coast is England's longest stretch of unbroken sand dunes. Now, this might just look like a whole lot of sand, but get closer and we can see some astonishing animals and plants living here between the land and the sea.
The sand lizard is now one of England's rarest reptiles because their dune homes have been disturbed and developed. This male is sporting his bright green courtship colours and is emerging from his sandy burrow to find a mate.
Sand heats up fast and holds its warmth long after the sun has gone. Ideal for reptiles and insects who need to get warm before they can become active. And this is the home of one of those insects, the northern dune tiger beetle.
Tiger beetles are the fastest insects on Earth and are ferocious predators. Their immense jaws are like long curved swords with daggers sticking out along each blade. So it's no surprise that mating can be a risky business. These beetles are now only found in 2 places in England. Many different bees also live in the warm sand. The females expertly digging burrows in which to lay their eggs. It's now early summer and the next generation of natterjacks are growing fast. But the natterjack tadpoles are not the only youngsters here. They must run the gauntlet from a predatory dragonfly nymph. The tadpoles have good protection if they stay in the swarm, safety in numbers. Back from the Brink partners are working hard to keep the pools open for the natterjacks. This is one of the last places in England where they survive. The adult toads take refuge in the grass on the dunes.
This toad is making its way from the dunes over towards the sea, and it's doing this for dinner.
The main attraction is the sandflies that are feeding around the high tide line.
These dunes take some looking after. Back from the Brink partners are working with all of the landowners around here to protect this amazing natural wealth. Be part of the solution. Volunteer at your local nature reserve in town or in the country and find out which awesome animals and plants live there. Protect our natural wealth. We can't live without it. Back from the Brink is one of the most ambitious conservation projects ever undertaken. Its aim is to save 20 species in England, all of whom are in danger of going extinct. It's the first time ever that so many conservation organisations have come together with one single focus, and it's this power of working together that's really making things happen. Much of this success is down to local people. So far, over 2,000 of them have volunteered to help Back from the Brink. This amounts to over 4,000 days. That's 10 years of working days given for free to protect our wildlife and wild spaces. Incredible.
I hope you've enjoyed this short video. If you're interested in learning more about Gems in the Dunes, then please get in touch with either the Amphibian and Reptile Council, who can tell you more about Gems in the Dunes and any of the other projects in Back from the Brink, or directly with Fiona and Andrew, the project team in Gems of the Dunes. They are very approachable people, very happy to tell you anything you'd like to know, and are the point of contact should you feel the desire to join as a volunteer.